living dignified lives, access to basic needs such as water, electricity, shelter, health, education, and security. So the narrative that the ANC has done nothing in the past 30 years is far-fetched and is far from being true. Transformation of the economic landscape, and these are the areas that the National Working Committee and the National Executive Committee would have touched on the transformation of the South African economy or the transformation of the national landscape. The ANC Youth League National Executive Committee spoke at length about the need for the Youth League to continue taking an interest in building of the South African economy. Majority of crises we face in the country would be resolved if we resolve the economic question. The ANC Youth League calls for the transformation of the economy through building a developmental state. So fundamentally to what the Youth League is saying is that you cannot build or transform the South African economy unless you build a capable developmental state that must lead the catching up in terms of economic transformation, social change and development in South Africa. And that's the standpoint of the Youth League. Build a strong developmental state, strong and capable developmental state. The current ANC Youth League collective has put forward several proposals, which include the immediate introduction of export quotas of all our raw minerals. Raw. I'm saying put export quotas on raw minerals, not on all commodities produced in the country, but on raw minerals in order to create the much needed jobs in the South African economy, create the economic value, create the capability, the technological capabilities that the country needs in order to catch up in terms of development and social change. This includes agricultural produce that we need to be able to ensure that we don't export raw produce. We beneficiate our produce to create the much needed jobs in South Africa. Otherwise, if we continue to do the pit to port, the plantation to port kind of economy or economic strategy, that exports jobs to other countries who beneficiate their mineral resources and their agricultural produce. On youth unemployment and as an agent focal point, the African National Congress Youth League places the youth unemployment at the top of its agenda. Many of the societal issues we face today, such as drug abuse, crime, gangsterism, and others, are because of young people who are sitting and idle at home and have no prospects of being employed. You would understand that the Youth League, since the 26th National Congress, the 26th National Executive Committee has been very clear that the issue that South Africa has got 64% of youth unemployment, the Youth League called that a national disaster. And in order to resolve this national disaster of youth unemployment, the Youth League make this particular proposition that we put the issue of youth unemployment at the top of our agenda. We don't enter into the National Working Committee or the National Executive Committee meeting without talking about how do we now further resolve the issue of youth unemployment in South Africa and refine those particular propositions. The ANC Youth League continues to sharply call for the immediate creation of jobs. That is why we call for the immediate reindustrialization of the South African economy in order to create the much needed jobs. We have said that our government needs to invest in reindustrialization to open job opportunities and reskilling of the youth. This should be done to make young people agile and mobile. Once you have job opportunities all over the country as a result of reindustrialization of the South African economy, you make young people to be agile and mobile. They go all over the country seeking for jobs in areas where their skills are compatible with the job opportunities in those particular areas. So you make young people mobile. They go to Gauteng, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, because there are jobs in those particular areas that are compatible to their particular skills or training. This should be done to make young people agile and mobile for the current needs of the economy and job market. We welcome the efforts by the Gauteng government on going all out to ensure that they train young people while giving them stipends, then also create first entry-level jobs for them so that they can gain experience. And we implore other provincial governments to follow suit from Mapanya-Panya. Mapanya-Panya is doing very well. Everywhere, in every sector of the economy, they are creating job opportunities in massively. Thousands of young people are entering into the entry-level job opportunities in Gauteng. We say this is possible in all other provinces, at least in all other 7 provinces except Gauteng. We know that won't happen in the Western Cape because they have no interest of the people. It is further a belief that the ANC Youth League, that the private sector needs to play or take a responsibility in attending this debacle of youth unemployment. The ANC Youth League will also be marching to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to demand that they contribute in job creation and economic growth and in funding higher education in this country. You would know that countries listed in the JSE Stock Exchange, they have an obligation by law that they should be contributing about 5% of their earnings into either jobs fund or job creation in terms of their obligation. And they have not been doing that. They have not been funding skills development or skills for the economy, or skills that are compatible to the economy, and they've not been doing that. We're saying these companies that are listed in the JSE Stock Exchange have to be taken to task. That's what the Youth League is saying there. The impact of technology in our lives. Technology has come with both advantages and disadvantages in our lives. The Youth League notes that technology has allowed us to have access to information on several matters. It has also brought us convenience through ability to purchase items and services at the comfort of our homes. It is further true that many businesses are up and running due to technology, especially small businesses owned by the youth. With all of the above positives, it is also worth noting that technology has opened up to propaganda material on social media, which is filled with misinformation, brainwashing, and all other negative impact that technology has. As the ANC, as the youth in South Africa, we need to be alert to these circumstances on social media. We need to be alert to these circumstances on social media. What we are saying here, colleagues, is that while technology has allowed, globalized channels of communication very easily, but it has also created a platform of misinformation and brainwashing. And this platform, if unabated, it can create people who think that they are informed when they have got wrong sources of knowledge and knowledge systems. And that's what we are alerting the South African youth around in this particular point. The ANC Youth League National Executive Committee further noted the impact of technology on the future of work, with many banks and restaurants beginning to leave certain parts of their operations to technology, therefore moving towards downsizing of staff. So what also technology is doing through the introduction of automated operations, AI, artificial intelligence, and robotics, is that it downsizes now the impact of the physical human in the operations of certain businesses. And this is now creating more further unemployment and making more profits to the business. And we're saying we need to regulate this particular element that technology brings to the fore in our economies. While it is efficient and effective to utilize robotics, automated operations, and artificial intelligence, but this must not actually have a negative impact in terms of creating much unemployment in the country. That's why it needs regulation to particular sectors. There are sectors that must be designated, that these sectors will not be allowed to have robots in the context of our own underdeveloped economy, because it will create huge youth unemployment in the country, which we are trying to fight against. The push against the use of coal under the guise of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. Here, we are calling for a just transition, and you will hear as we just transition. And we're saying just transition must be just, and it must not disadvantage developing countries like South Africa and other developing countries in the continent and in the Asian Pacific and Latin America. The ANC has resolved in gearing up to oppose the NGOs that which are heavily funded by multinational corporations to advance a closure of our fossil fuel minerals, a closure of the use of our fossil fuel minerals. This includes coal, oil, and gas in the west coast of the Western Cape. The different organizations, including certain governments, are approaching our municipalities, deceiving them that to take international loans to start projects which will be alternative to giving livelihoods when the mines and our fossil fuels are not utilized. South Africa has a huge deposit of coal and other gas, coal, oil, and gas, and we'll give statistics to this. The coal being our primary energy source at the moment. More than 85% of our country's electricity, approximately 30% of our liquefied fuel, and about 70% of our total energy needs are produced from coal. In essence, coal plays a significant role in the supply side of the South African chemical industry and is also important in the steel-making industry in the country. It is therefore in our best interest as a nation that we protect our national interests through calling for a just transition where we convert coal-fired power stations into gas-fired power stations. What this will do, it will reduce carbon emissions by 50% when we use gas instead of coal-fired power stations. Now, here, colleagues, we are trying to make an expansion that coal-fired power stations will make our economy uncompetitive in the current global governance, because they've introduced in Europe and in America what they will call carbon tax borders. The carbon tax borders, what they do, any commodity you produce through a coal-fired power station will be heavily taxed because it will be said that it has contributed into the carbon emissions. Now, in order to avert this, we're saying let's expedite the conversion of coal-fired power stations into gas-fired power stations. There is literature and evidence that South Africa has got gas underground. All we need to do is to invest in the exploration of gas and its utilization as a country. And therefore, we go down in terms of carbon emissions and we make our economy competitive. But what we are saying as the Youth League, as the ANC Youth League, of course, understands that the need for an integrated energy mix. However, the Youth League calls for an energy mix that is just and developmental in the context of our underdeveloped economies as African nation states. What we are saying here is that we are not going to just shut down coal-fired power stations. We are going to be investing on gas exploration, and on the basis of the investment of the gas exploration, utilize gas to convert coal-fired to gas-fired power stations. And by that, we will maintain our base load as the country, but also utilize nuclear in order to maintain our base load, providing cleaner sources of energy over a particular a period of time. And that is why we're saying it will not be just for our economies, in the African economies, if we just shut down what we have now, which is our competitive advantage as deposits of coal. But we have called for the more research, innovation and development on the multiple uses of coal as a commodity now, because there are other valuable multiple use values of coal that coal could be utilized for instead of coal to electricity. It can be utilized for other multiple uses, like we have mentioned, the petrochemical industry, the steel industry, and other industries that can benefit out of our deposits of this particular critical mineral, which is a coal. On youth must take over corridors of power. That is on youth on governance now. The African National Congress Youth League has gone over the manifesto of the ANC, and we were part of its development, and remains convinced that it is the only organization which still cares about the transforming the lives of all the people of South Africa. The sixth priority plan of the ANC manifesto speaks about bringing about quality lives for all citizens of South Africa. With that being said, the ANC Youth League believes that the implementation of the progressive manifesto of the ANC post the elections will require young leaders at the helm of strategic positions, particularly the economic cluster. The ANC Youth League has not hidden its call for the youth to occupy ministerial and deputy ministerial positions in the coming new administration. What this means, colleagues, is that we will be calling for the National Executive Committee of the ANC, the President of the ANC, to appoint much energetic, innovative, and capable young leaders who are there, by the way, in the list of the ANC, who must now take forward the development of South Africa into a much more egalitarian society. And we have made propositions to this particular effect of the need to industrialize the South African economy in order for it to create the much needed jobs, the need to ensure that we revamp our logistic networks in order for them to be able to support the reindustrialization program of the ANC. And these, colleagues, we are saying must happen within this particular administration. Now, when we call for younger leaders to come in, we don't mean only those that are 35 and below. There are recent graduates of the Youth League, which we know are very capable to assist us in this generational mission of economic freedom in our lifetime. The ANC Youth League's program is anchored on economic freedom in our lifetime. What economic freedom means to us is that the South African economy, as it is currently structured, does not reflect the demographics of this country. Does not reflect the demographics of the country. Majority of our people who are Africans and blacks are in the margins of the economy, while we are expecting that the economy should be working for them. Now, we're saying in order for this to be resolved, we require that younger comrades must come in. And when that time comes, we will be naming who are those that we see capable to be coming in the different sections of the economic cluster in order to advance this particular interest of young people. We're not speaking from our, thumb sucking. We have been interacting with young people on the ground, and they've been telling us that this is what they want in order for them to support the ANC. And you have seen all over South Africa that the reaction of young people to the Youth League, to the revived Youth League, has been very positive. And now we are calling for these particular issues to be implemented. On the international front, the ANC Youth League, the African National Congress Youth League, reiterates its support of the struggle of the people of Palestine against the illegal occupation by Israel. We applaud the ANC-led government, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, for taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. This was a bold move by our government, openly stand opposed to oppression and the genocide we've witnessed in Gaza over the years. I mean, no government in the world has ever taken Israel, backed up by America and all these other reactionary nation states, has ever taken Israel head on. We understand that the consequences of doing that particular just and a progressive move to stand against the tyranny, of imperialists who have occupied Gaza illegally, will have adverse consequences economically for the ANC. We've heard that Joe Biden would have made a very reactionary statement on CNN that they will impose sanctions to South Africa if the ANC wins. And that's a very reactionary comment of a person who calls himself a Democrat, who does not respect sovereignty of other nation states, who calls for a regime change in South Africa because we stood against their own stooges, Israel, as South Africa, and as the ANC in particular, as the governing party in this country. So we stand with the ANC on that one. We'll fight and defend that particular resolution. We stand with principle that the people of Palestine must be free. On the Russia-Ukraine war, the ANC Youth League supports and advocates for the solution through diplomatic talks instead of war. The Russia-Ukraine war has affected production costs, also input and output costs, which have resulted in the increase of the cost of food. And the cost of living crisis that we are trying to resolve is as a result of these geopolitical wars that are happening in Russia, Ukraine, and it's affecting people rather than egos, as it were. The ANC Youth League further stands opposed to the prolonged occupation of Western Sahara and the brutal monarchy of Swaziland. The ANC Youth League stands against any illegal occupation of any country by another, oppression by regimes within states, and undemocratic ruling of countries. What we mean here, comrades, is that if there is any form of reactionary undemocratic ruling, we draw this from the Freedom Charter, that no one must ever lead without the will of the people in any particular country. But we respect the international laws of territorial boundary of nation states and their sovereignty. But they must not expect us to support them when they know that they are not respecting the UN Charter in terms of the human rights and so on that must be protected in each and every nation state. On the detractors of our revolution, comrades and colleagues, every revolution has detractors, and we should not be scared and intimidated by detractors. In our revolution, detractors include those sowing divisions so that our movement will not unite at the helm of those who have re-evoked tribalism in our society. We have witnessed the detractors such as the MK Party, led by a man who almost collapsed our state, resuscitating tribal and regional violence in KwaZulu-Natal. And as progressives, we must call them into order. This country can never again afford to face the ugly head of tribalism and regionalism. South African politics, our history as a country teaches us that organizing along tribal lines and regional lines divides our country and leads to destruction. And this is what the ANC has always stood against, comrades and colleagues. The ANC fought against an attempt by draconian colonial rules to divide Africans amongst their tribal lines, to divide Africans among their regional lines, and to seek to unite all Africans under the banner and the vision of the African National Congress for the total liberation of our people. And any attempt now in the democratic dispensation by a party called MK Party, we've been seeing, these mushrooming parties, but they've not really organized like the MK Party is doing in terms of trying to create regional and tribal lines in terms of its mobilization. And it's a very dangerous phenomenon, and that we must all call an order to. Till today, there are families who are still feeling the pain of having had lost loved ones on the wars that ensued in communities fueled by tribal fundamentalist and black violence. The youth on this country must stand opposed to any form of mobilization that resembles the ugly head of the past, which is the divide and rule that apartheid would have wanted to sow in the African communities and in our communities as a whole in the country. So we view people like President Zuma to be, some neo-apartheid, agents. Because if you divide the African people on the basis of the tribal and regional lines, you are, in fact, bringing a form of a new apartheid, divide and so that you can be able to rule. And that divide and rule strategy, we're calling for young people to reject it, particularly as it relates to tribal line. It should be on policy and other political issues that we differ with other political parties. As we make our choices on where to stand on this, we cannot avoid the blatant stealing of the intellectual property of the ANC through the so-called leaders of the MK Party, stealing the name of Umkhonto weSizwe, as well as the emblem of Umkhonto weSizwe, a heritage of our people. This was just a reminder of how crooked their leaders were when they were still in the ANC. Corruption was at the worst in the country. It comes as no surprise that the formation of the party is mirrored by theft. When a person is used into stealing, he even steals a heritage of the ANC because he is used into stealing. When he is called out for stealing, he now wants to steal the property of the ANC. And you know who that character is. And we're calling for that character to stop from this particular act. We must reject everything that is unorganizational, gaslighting us and makes us and takes us for a ride. Furthermore, the ANC condemns the unacceptable remarks made by the Pick and Pay CEO, Sion Summers. It is completely unacceptable for an individual who directly benefited from the horrors of apartheid to belittle the struggle by the ANC by labeling it as a crime against humanity. I mean, any sane and sober South African should know that Pick and Pay CEO, when he says a South Africa led by the ANC is a crime against humanity, for an ANC that has fought for the democratic dispensation in South Africa, including democratic gains, anyone who is sane and sober, including Rupert, you know, Rupert has been very clear that under the ANC, there's been many freedoms and liberties, including the growth of the economy at 7 folds. You know, but this fellow, who's called Simon Summers, says it's a crime against humanity. Meaning, when Africans and all other people of different origins are in a democratic dispensation, to him, as an apartheid stooge or an apartheid beneficiary, that's a crime against humanity. And we are saying all progressive forces should condemn this kind of call by Simon Summers, and should redirect his energy towards his failing business, which is losing a large amount of market share and leaving franchises in dire straits. UN declared that the apartheid was a crime against humanity, and SIN is one of the direct beneficiaries of the crime against humanity. And the ANC-led government has significantly improved the lives of South Africans, restoring dignity that was tarnished by individuals like him. You'll find that his father was a beneficiary of ill-gotten land in this country, including economic benefits. And now he has got the guts to say the ANC is a crime against humanity. If he holds grievances against the ANC, he should address them directly rather than resorting into disrespectful and undemocratic statements. Rest assured that the ANC Youth League will not hesitate to take appropriate actions against him in due course. It's important that Steinman understands that consequences of his words and behaves responsibly, particularly given the position of influence within his business. We will come for the Pick and Pay stores, and the Youth League is going to run a campaign, and if they don't remove him as a CEO, the consequences will be more dire for the business. We are not calling for the shutdown of Pick and Pay, but the removal of a reactionary like him. On organizational matters, the ANC Youth League National Executive Committee deliberated on several internal organizational matters. The meeting acknowledged the work which has been done by various structures of the organization, which contributed to the great deal of the revival of the African National Congress Youth League. The NEC applauded the program which have been implemented by provinces. Our provinces have been doing very well, regions and branches. The strong presence of the Youth League in the campaign trail cannot be ignored and will continue to be a great deal in the victory of the ANC in the coming elections. On the work done by the subcommittees, the African National Congress Youth League would have commended the National Executive Committee subcommittees and received a report on the work done by the subcommittees. It was agreed that this is significant work, which is a cornerstone on the effectiveness of the National Executive Committee. The sterling work of the committees was applauded, and it was resolved that more effort will be put in having more programs led by subcommittees, which will further serve as an example to our lower structures. You would have seen that our subcommittees have been performing very well on education, on health, on the economy, on what should be done to transform the economy, fight against GBV, on the international front, on the work that our subcommittees have been doing. On our Peter Mukaba volunteers, the ANC League gladly welcomed structures that have launched their Peter Mukaba volunteers and now calls on those structures to hit the ground running in honor of President Peter Mukaba. Our volunteers must actively participate in the campaign and lead programs which will result in more votes of the African National Congress. The ANC has done a lot of work in government, and we must go and tell the good story that the ANC-led government has done, as well as speak about the progressive manifesto the ANC has put forward to resolve some of the challenges that continue to persist. The NEC resolved that the structures of the organization must have an elections campaign program, among others, massive recruitment, Fridays sectorial work, Saturdays massive door-to-doors, and church visits on Sundays. On the state of the organization, the National Executive Committee resolved that on the detailed report received by the National Executive Committee, the organization is steadily growing and gives us confidence that we have a greater potential. The NEC calls on all structures of the Youth League not to stop recruiting, but continue with the elections campaign while also recruiting. There are currently 4 provinces with task teams, mainly KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and the Western Cape. The National Executive Committee expressed an interest to possibly have all our provinces having had set their provincial congresses by the time we host the 80th anniversary celebration in September. So this year we'll be having the Youth League on September. It will be turning 80 years since its formation in 1944. So by that time, we would have launched all the 4 provinces. They would have gone to their own provincial congresses. To provide further support to these provinces, the National Executive Committee resolved that it must reinforce the work done by the deployees in those particular provinces with officials. The 80th anniversary celebration of the ANC Youth League. The 80th anniversary celebration will be hosted by Limpopo Province in Peter Mukaba Stadium with 45,000 capacity stadium. A comprehensive plan is being formulated by organizing for preparations of this massive and significant celebration. We deliberately took the 80th celebration into Peter Mukaba Stadium. You would know that we launched Peter Mukaba volunteers in these national and provincial general elections. We're saying we're closing the Peter Mukaba recognition in this particular phase of the revival of the Youth League through celebrating the 80th anniversary in a stadium that has been named after him. Peter Mukaba was the first president of the Youth League post the unbanning of political parties in 1990. And in 1991, he was elected the president of the Youth League. So as we revive the Youth League post the lull of 8 years, we revive it, remembering Comrade Peter as the former president of the Youth League, who revived it and took it into greater heights, as it were. On our relations with other progressive youth alliance structures, the ANC Youth League enjoys cordial relations with all organizations in the PYA structures, namely SASCO, COSAS, the ANC, the Young Communist League, COSATU Young Workers Forum. We attend each other's programs and extend messages of solidarity to each other. We also have now resolved on running a joint political education programs with our progressive youth allied structures as part of reminding and revival of the liberation politics amongst the youth structures in the country. The ANC Youth League is looking forward to sitting with the COSATU National Conference, with COSATU National Conference, so that it is finally elected. It has an elected leadership. The ANC Youth League welcomes the victory of SRC elections won by SASCO so far and issues a stern warning that no branch of the Youth League in any campus must contest SASCO. If we find a branch of our organization contesting SASCO in the banner in the name of the Youth League, those ones will be in the firing line. Thank you very much, colleagues. That's an update of the National Working Committee and the National Executive Committee, as it were. Thank you very much, Spokes. Thanks.
Thanks very much to the SG for providing a comprehensive update from our most recent National Executive Committee as the ANC Youth League. I'm sure you heard we've been very busy in a number of different sectors, and we really are hard at work. When we talk about the revival of the ANC Youth League, it's most certainly not just about electing at conference. It's about putting back the politics into our youth organization and youth structures around the country. Colleagues, let me see if there's any questions. Let me start on this side of the room, and then we can facilitate that moving forward. I know some people's names. I don't know everybody, but I know colleagues will be kind and patient with me as we do it together. Samkelo will take you first. The gentleman on the right, I'll take you number 2, 3. I got you at number 2. Anyone else on the side before I move across the room? Right, I've got those 3, and then I think on the side it's mostly our team. All right, let's hand over to you, Samkelo.
Thank you. Samkelo myself from the SABC. Mr. Ngolile, on the essence of the economic transformation and also the constitution of the cabinet post-elections, what are some of the economic cluster ministries you as the ANC Youth League are looking at getting? Ask the question on the backdrop that our sources have told us that some of the interviews that have taken place by the ANC selection panel, some of your former leaders were asked economic questions, and the interviews were based on a scenario of potential deployments areas of those people who were interviewed. Now take Malusi Kigabo, for example. He was interviewed on the economic cluster questions. Then secondly, on the issue of the 80th anniversary of the Youth League, what is the basis and the thinking behind going to Peter Mokaba Stadium, noting that you've already spent about 10 million rands with the rally that you held at the Alexandra Stadium? How much money are you looking at actually spending in all of these rallies that you've been having across the country, from Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, in the College Chabana region where you had a massive rally as well, and now you're looking at going to Peter Mokaba. Hosting a stadium is not cheap. And what are the finances looking like of the Youth League to the Treasurer General Zwelo Masilela? You were liquidated last I checked. You inherited a bank account and there was a deficit from your Congress that was held about a year or so ago. Then lastly, on the MK party, why spend so much energy and time speaking of that particular organization, rather than hitting the ground running and campaigning and seeking those votes from South Africans, rather than speaking about the past of the guy or the man who used to be at the helm of the party? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Samkelo.
Good day, my name is Noah and I work for the Sunday Welsh. Let me start where Samuel ended with the MK party. What evidence do you have that the MK party is mobilizing on tribal and regional lines? I ask this because some people may argue that it is just an area of focus because that's where they are support. Why would you go to the lens of accusing them of tribalism, as it were? In fact, the So what is it that makes you as the ANC say they are, on a data ground of regionalism and tribalism? Two,